My girlfriend said her ex could stay in our guest room, and if I didn't like it, I could find somewhere else to sleep. I'd been living in Ashley's downtown Seattle condo for 3 years, paying 2/3 of the mortgage and every utility bill, plus I'd furnished the entire place including my prized 200-gallon saltwater reef aquarium that dominated one corner of the living room. Most people would call that home, but apparently I was just a well-paying tenant with benefits. Ashley worked as a veterinary technician and made decent money, but somehow I'd become responsible for keeping us financially afloat while she made every decision about our shared space. She'd redecorated the bedroom without asking, rearranged my aquarium equipment because it cluttered the space, and consistently dismissed my input on everything from what we'd have for dinner to how we'd spend our weekends. I should have recognized the pattern earlier, but love makes you rationalize a lot of disrespect. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening while I was testing water chemistry in my reef tank, carefully adjusting the pH levels for my collection of rare coral specimens I'd spent years cultivating. Ashley walked in from work and casually dropped the bomb that would change everything. "So, Trevor's going to stay in the guest room for about a week while he finds an apartment," she announced, not even looking up from her phone. "His lease fell through and he needs somewhere temporary." Trevor was her ex-boyfriend from college, the guy she'd dated for 2 years before we met. I set down my water testing kit and turned to face her. "You didn't think to discuss this with me first? It's just for a few days, Garrett. Don't be dramatic." She scrolled through Instagram while talking, like my concerns were background noise. "He's going through a rough time and needs help. And you thought the best help would be staying in our guest room? It's my condo," she said, finally looking at me with that expression she got whenever I questioned her decisions. "I can have whoever I want stay here. If it makes you uncomfortable, you can stay at that hotel down the street for a few nights." The casual way she suggested I leave my own home hit me like cold water. Not our home. Not even a discussion about alternatives. Just pack up and get out if I didn't like her unilateral decision to house her ex-boyfriend. I stared at her, watching her return to her phone like she just suggested we order pizza instead of completely disregarding my feelings about our living situation. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You invited your ex to stay in the home I helped pay for, and your solution to my discomfort is for me to leave? God, you're being so possessive. Trevor and I are just friends now. We've been broken up for years." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. Some people actually maintain healthy relationships with their exes. The dismissiveness in her voice told me everything I needed to know about how she viewed my role in this relationship. I wasn't a partner whose feelings mattered. I was an obstacle to her doing whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. That night, lying in bed next to someone who'd rather have me sleep in a hotel than inconvenience her ex-boyfriend, I realized this wasn't about Trevor at all. This was about 3 years of being treated like my opinions, my comfort, and my investment in our shared life meant absolutely nothing when they conflicted with what Ashley wanted. I spent that sleepless night mentally cataloging every time Ashley had made unilateral decisions about our life together, and the list was depressingly long. She'd invited her book club to meet at our place every Thursday without asking, claiming the living room every week while I retreated to the bedroom. When I suggested we alternate hosting duties with other members, she'd rolled her eyes and said I was being antisocial. She'd thrown out my comfortable reading chair because it didn't match her aesthetic vision, replacing it with a decorative bench that looked nice but felt like sitting on concrete. Every time I'd brought up these issues, she dismissed them as me being inflexible or controlling, somehow making me the villain for wanting input on decisions that affected both of us. The pattern was crystal clear. Ashley's comfort and preferences always took priority, while mine were treated as minor inconveniences to be managed or ignored. Even my aquarium, which had cost me $12,000 and represented years of careful ecosystem building, was constantly under attack. She complained it made too much noise, took up too much space, and that the equipment was an eyesore. I'd spent countless hours explaining the delicate balance required to maintain a thriving reef system, but she saw it as an expensive hobby that cluttered her perfect living space. The irony wasn't lost on me that she showed more respect for Trevor's temporary comfort than for my permanent investment in our shared home. By 4 a.m., I'd made my decision. This wasn't about salvaging our relationship anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity and self-worth from someone who viewed me as a convenient wallet with an unfortunate opinion problem. I wasn't going to beg someone to respect me, and I certainly wasn't going to compete with her ex-boyfriend for basic consideration in my own home. When Ashley left for work the next morning, still acting like nothing significant had happened, I began executing the most liberating plan of my adult life. My first call was to Waterfront Luxury Suites, an upscale extended-stay hotel with panoramic views of Puget Sound that I'd always admired during my morning runs. Instead of booking a few days like Ashley had suggested, I reserved their premium corner suite for a full month. The rate was expensive, but I could afford it now that I wouldn't be subsidizing someone else's mortgage and lifestyle. The suite featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a private balcony overlooking the water, a full kitchen, and enough space for me to properly decompress from 3 years of walking on eggshells. Next, I contacted Premier Relocations, a company specializing in delicate moves for collectors and professionals. I explained that I needed everything I owned removed quickly and professionally, with special attention to my saltwater aquarium system. The representative understood immediately when I mentioned rare coral specimens and fish worth several $1,000s. They assured me they had experience with aquatic relocations and would provide battery-powered life support systems during transport. The estimate was substantial, but this wasn't about saving money. This was about getting my life back with my dignity intact. I spent the rest of the morning documenting every item I'd purchased for the condo, photographing serial numbers, and gathering receipts from my meticulously organized financial records. 3 years of furniture, electronics, kitchen appliances, and decorative items that Ashley had grown so accustomed to she probably thought of them as jointly owned. The paperwork told a different story. Everything valuable in that condo had been purchased with my money, and I had documentation to prove it. The movers arrived at exactly 9 a.m. the next day, a team of 4 professionals who treated my belongings like museum pieces rather than just furniture. I'd specifically requested their premium service, which cost extra but guaranteed careful handling of delicate items. They started with my home office setup, carefully wrapping my dual monitors, ergonomic desk, and the custom-built computer I used for analyzing marine ecosystem data. Each component was photographed, labeled, and secured in specialized foam containers that looked like they could survive a hurricane. The aquarium relocation required a specialist who arrived with equipment I'd never seen before: portable battery-powered filtration systems, insulated transport containers, and oxygen tanks to maintain water chemistry during the move. Watching him carefully net each of my prized specimens felt surreal, like dismantling 3 years of my life one tropical fish at a time. My rare sea anemones and coral colonies that had taken months to acclimate were gently placed in temperature-controlled containers with backup life support systems. The 200-gallon tank itself required 4 men and a hydraulic dolly, but they moved it like it was made of crystal rather than reinforced glass. Next came the furniture that had transformed Ashley's sterile condo into something that actually felt livable. The leather sectional sofa I'd saved 6 months to buy, the dining room set where we'd hosted dinner parties, the bedroom furniture that had replaced her college dorm cast-offs. Even my expensive espresso machine that Ashley had claimed was ours, despite me being the only one who knew how to operate it properly. The movers worked with military precision, emptying each room systematically while I directed traffic and checked items off my inventory list. I left behind only Ashley's original furniture: a cheap coffee table from her college days, a wobbly bookshelf, and the uncomfortable futon she'd relegated to the guest room when I moved in. The piece de resistance was my parting gift in the guest room where Trevor would be staying. I inflated a camping air mattress I'd purchased that morning and left it in the center of the empty space with a handwritten note: "For your guest, enjoy the comfort level you've provided me. Thanks for 3 educational years." By 3 p.m., my entire life was loaded into a climate-controlled storage facility while I checked into my waterfront suite. The contrast was immediate and intoxicating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered unobstructed views of Puget Sound, where ferries glided between islands under an endless sky. The suite featured marble countertops, a rainfall shower, and a private balcony where I could actually hear my own thoughts without the constant hum of Ashley's opinions about what I should be doing differently. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of champagne from the hotel's room service menu, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely peaceful. My phone buzzed with increasing frequency as Ashley discovered the extent of what I'd removed, but I turned off notifications and placed it face down on the table. Her frantic messages could wait. Right now, I was enjoying the most expensive view in Seattle and feeling like I'd finally come home. When I finally checked my phone the next morning, I had 43 missed calls and a novel's worth of increasingly unhinged text messages. Ashley's initial confusion had evolved into pure rage as she realized the full scope of what I'd taken. "Where is everything?" had progressed to, "You can't just steal furniture we bought together," and eventually to, "I'm calling the police, this is theft." The beautiful irony was that every item she claimed as jointly owned had been purchased entirely with my money, and I had the receipts to prove it. Her sense of entitlement was so complete that she genuinely believed 3 years of living together had somehow granted her ownership rights to things she'd never paid for. The most telling message came at 2 a.m. "How am I supposed to sleep without a bed? Trevor thinks you're completely psychotic." Apparently, her ex-boyfriend's comfort was still more important than understanding why I'd left. By noon, Ashley's mother Patricia had joined the harassment campaign with a series of voicemails that made her daughters sound reasonable by comparison. "Garrett, I don't know what kind of mental breakdown you're having, but destroying my daughter's life isn't going to solve your problems," she screeched into my voicemail. "Ashley told me what you did, and I'm calling my lawyer. You can't just steal someone's belongings because you're having a tantrum." Patricia had always treated me like an inconvenient obstacle to her daughter's happiness, despite the fact that I'd been subsidizing Ashley's lifestyle for years. Now she was threatening legal action over property I could prove belonged to me. The apple clearly hadn't fallen far from the entitled tree. The most unexpected call came from Trevor himself, who sounded genuinely uncomfortable when I finally answered. "Hey man, I had no idea about any of this drama when Ashley offered me the guest room," he said awkwardly. "She made it sound like you were cool with me staying here, and now I'm sleeping on an air mattress in an empty apartment while she loses her mind about missing furniture." I almost felt sorry for him. "Trevor, I appreciate you calling, but Ashley made her choice when she prioritized your comfort over our relationship. She suggested I stay in a hotel rather than discuss her decision with me first. Any consequences from that are hers to handle. Look, I can find somewhere else to crash if it helps fix things between you two." "There's nothing to fix. She showed me exactly where I rank in her priorities, and I'm not interested in competing for basic respect in my own home." Trevor was quiet for a moment. "Man, I'm really sorry. I honestly had no idea how bad things were between you guys. This whole situation is incredibly awkward." After Trevor hung up, I felt a strange sense of validation. Even Ashley's ex-boyfriend could see how unreasonable her behavior had been, yet she remained convinced I was the villain in this story. That afternoon, Ashley escalated by showing up at my hotel and demanding to speak with me. Hotel security called my room to ask if I wanted to see her, and I politely declined. According to the front desk manager, she'd made quite a scene in the lobby, crying and insisting I was having a mental breakdown and needed help. They'd finally asked her to leave when she started shouting about stolen property and demanding access to my room. The image of Ashley having a public meltdown in the marble lobby of a luxury hotel while I enjoyed room service upstairs felt like poetic justice. The next morning, I called my attorney friend Mitchell, who specialized in civil litigation and had helped me review contracts for my consulting business. I explained the situation and forwarded him screenshots of the threatening messages from both Ashley and her mother. Mitchell's response was immediate and reassuring. "Garrett, everything you removed legally belongs to you. The fact that you live together doesn't create joint ownership of items purchased with your individual funds. Keep all those receipts and documentation safe, and document every instance of harassment for potential restraining order proceedings." His professional calm made me realize how right my decision had been. Within a week, Ashley filed a civil lawsuit claiming joint ownership of my aquarium system and furniture, seeking monetary damages for what she termed malicious theft of shared property. The paperwork was laughably thin on evidence but heavy on emotional manipulation, describing me as a vindictive ex-boyfriend who destroyed her home out of spite. Her attorney had clearly been fed a version of events that painted her as the victim of my alleged mental breakdown. I forwarded the lawsuit to Mitchell, who actually laughed when he read it. She's claiming ownership of items she can't prove she contributed to financially. This is going to be easier than I thought. Meanwhile, I'd found the perfect permanent residence, a stunning loft apartment in Pioneer Square with exposed brick walls and 12-foot ceilings that would accommodate an even larger aquarium setup than before. The historic building had character Ashley's sterile condo had never possessed, and signing the lease in my name only felt like the final step in reclaiming my independence. The space was entirely mine, with no one else's aesthetic preferences to accommodate or furniture arrangements to negotiate. Mitchell's preparation for Ashley's lawsuit was methodical and devastating. We compiled 3 years of bank statements, credit card records, and receipts that proved I'd purchased every disputed item individually. My meticulous financial record-keeping, which Ashley had always mocked as obsessive, became the foundation of an airtight defense. We even had insurance documentation listing me as the sole owner of the aquarium and its contents, with professional appraisals of the rare coral specimens she was claiming half ownership of. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice after a 15-minute hearing where Ashley's attorney couldn't produce a single piece of evidence supporting her claims. The judge was clearly annoyed by the frivolous nature of the case and warned Ashley about filing future claims without substantial evidence. Outside the courthouse, I watched her face crumble as she realized her legal gambit had failed completely, while I felt nothing but relief that this chapter was officially closed. Trevor had quietly moved out after 3 days of sleeping on an air mattress, later telling mutual friends that the situation had become extremely uncomfortable. According to him, Ashley spent those nights ranting about how I'd destroyed her life and stolen her security, never once acknowledging that her own decisions had created the entire mess. He admitted he'd felt like an unwitting catalyst in the breakdown of our relationship and had no interest in staying longer than absolutely necessary. The empty condo that Ashley had to furnish from scratch with her own money became a daily reminder of what she'd lost through her own entitled behavior. 2 weeks after the lawsuit was dismissed, Patricia escalated her harassment campaign by appearing at my new building and confronting residents in the lobby. She'd stationed herself near the mailboxes, stopping anyone who looked like they might know me to share her version of events. Her daughter's boyfriend had suffered a mental breakdown and stolen everything she owned, leaving her destitute and traumatized. Building management called me after several complaints from neighbors who felt uncomfortable being cornered by an agitated stranger demanding information about my personal life. I filed for a comprehensive restraining order the next day, providing Mitchell with security footage from my building that showed Patricia's increasingly aggressive behavior toward innocent residents. Her confrontational approach and wild accusations about my mental state were clearly documented, along with timestamps showing she'd returned multiple times despite being asked to leave. The judge granted the restraining order immediately after viewing the footage and reading Patricia's threatening voicemails, noting that her behavior constituted harassment and intimidation. Ashley apparently decided that legal boundaries didn't apply to her family's righteous crusade for justice, because she violated the restraining order within 48 hours. She created multiple fake social media accounts to circumvent the blocks I'd placed, sending messages that ranged from pleading to threatening. "You can't hide behind lawyers forever, Garrett. I know where you work and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." Her promise to sabotage my professional reputation wasn't an idle threat. Ashley began contacting my consulting clients with fabricated stories about my reliability and mental stability, claiming I'd abandoned important projects without notice and was having a breakdown that made me unfit for professional responsibilities. She somehow obtained my client list, probably through mutual connections, and systematically attempted to destroy my business relationships with lies about my character and competence. Mitchell immediately sent cease and desist letters to Ashley and drafted additional legal action for business interference, while I contacted each affected client personally to explain the situation and provide documentation of my actual work history. Fortunately, my reputation for thorough, reliable work spoke louder than her desperate smear campaign, and most clients were more concerned about her behavior than anything she'd claimed about me. Ashley was arrested for violating the restraining order when she showed up at my office building during business hours, demanding to speak with my colleagues about my alleged instability. Security footage showed her becoming increasingly agitated when reception refused to give her access to my floor, eventually requiring police intervention when she refused to leave. She spent a night in jail, which apparently did nothing to diminish her sense of victimhood or her belief that I was the villain in this story. Friends began reaching out with increasingly bizarre updates about Ashley's social media presence, where she'd started posting daily rants about predatory men who steal from innocent women and destroy their victims' lives for entertainment. Her Instagram stories became a stream of consciousness about financial abuse and emotional manipulation, with thinly veiled references to our relationship that painted me as a calculating sociopath who'd systematically isolated and robbed her. The irony of her claiming financial abuse while having lived rent-free in luxury for 3 years was apparently lost on her entirely. 6 months later, my new loft had been transformed into everything I'd dreamed of but never could achieve while accommodating someone else's preferences. The main living area now housed 3 interconnected aquarium systems: my original 200-gallon reef tank, a new 150-gallon predator tank with moray eels, and a specialized breeding system for rare coral propagation. The exposed brick walls and industrial fixtures created the perfect backdrop for my marine biology paradise, and I'd started hosting educational tours for local elementary schools who were fascinated by the underwater ecosystems I'd created. Teaching kids about marine conservation in my own space felt more rewarding than any compromise I'd made in my previous relationship. I'd also started dating Marina, a fellow marine biologist I'd met at a conservation conference who worked for the Seattle Aquarium's research division. She found my home aquarium setup absolutely fascinating rather than inconvenient, often spending evenings helping me monitor water chemistry and discussing the behavioral patterns of different species. The contrast with Ashley was stunning. Marina contributed her expertise, shared my passion for marine life, and treated my hobby as a window into my character rather than an obstacle to her decorating plans. Through mutual friends, I learned that Ashley had struggled financially after losing my contributions to her mortgage and lifestyle, eventually finding a roommate to help cover expenses she'd never had to worry about before. According to these reports, she'd grudgingly admitted to a few people that she may have taken me for granted, though she still maintained that my departure had been a cruel overreaction to a simple misunderstanding about Trevor's visit. Her inability to acknowledge the deeper pattern of disrespect that had led to that breaking point showed she'd learned very little from the experience. Patricia continued her one-woman campaign against my character on neighborhood social media groups, posting increasingly unhinged rants about predatory men who target innocent women and steal their life savings. Most people in her community had learned to ignore her posts, which had evolved from specific accusations about me to general warnings about men who use financial control to manipulate their victims. The irony that her daughter had been the one exercising financial control by living off my income while dismissing my needs was apparently still beyond her comprehension. I reflected often on how leaving had been about much more than Trevor's visit to our guest room. That incident had simply been the final, undeniable proof that Ashley viewed our relationship as a hierarchy where her comfort and preferences would always take priority over mine. She'd spent 3 years training me to accept that my opinions didn't matter, my financial contributions were expected rather than appreciated, and my role was to facilitate her lifestyle rather than participate as an equal partner. Breaking that pattern had required walking away completely rather than trying to negotiate for basic respect I should never have had to fight for in the first place. The greatest revelation was discovering how much energy I'd been spending on managing someone else's emotions and accommodating their demands, energy I could now invest in my own goals and relationships that actually added value to my life instead of constantly depleting it.